The Conservatives yesterday tried to vote down the Immigration and Borders Bill. Obviously, they don't have enough numbers in the House to do it. But can you believe that because the government have taken out the provisions to have a Rwanda-style deterrent, which I say in inverted commas, that they voted down something that's going to strengthen and could actually stop people smugglers putting people's lives at danger and crossing the channel? Now, this was a debate, so you don't get the questions and answers like you do in an urgent question. But the Labour backbenchers pretty much said everything that people were thinking anyway, and Chris Philp took pretty much of a beating from them instead of the Home Secretary for a change. To start off, we do have the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, with a couple of facts about the state of the immigration system, the asylum system, and then it's just Chris Philp getting hammered for his ridiculous stance. And you can see the Home Secretary was actually loving it at certain points.
But so that those with no right to be here are swiftly returned, and so the rules are respected and enforced. None of those things have been happening in recent years because when this government took office, basic rules had stopped being enforced, the asylum system had been crashed, and smuggling gangs saw the UK as an easy target. And the last Conservative government completely lost control of our borders. Under the last government, asylum decision-making collapsed, a 70% drop in monthly decision-making in the run-up to the election, an 80% drop in asylum interviews. The entire asylum system crashed by their chaotic legislation, driving the backlog up at huge cost to the taxpayer. And enforcement undermined, a 34% drop in returns compared to the last Labour government. Just 4 employers charged with illegally employing migrant workers in the space of 2.5 years. And of course, £700 million spent sending 4 volunteers to Rwanda. A programme that ran for more than 2 years and sent just 4 volunteers. We said, Madam Speaker, at the time, my Deputy Speaker at the time, we said at the time, frankly, it would have been cheaper to send those same people on a round trip to Australia on the former Prime Minister's private helicopter. It turns out it would have been cheaper to buy each of them a fleet of private helicopters themselves. Never mind, frankly, spending the money on paying for thousands more doctors, more nurses or police officers, or paying to boost our border security instead. So we said in our manifesto that we would stop the chaos, return order to the system. That's what this bill does, and that's exactly what we're doing. And importantly too, the bill also restores order to the asylum system by putting an end to some of the failed gimmicks and unworkable mess that the previous government left us with, including sorting out the chaos created by the unworkable and contradictory provisions in the Illegal Migration Act, most of them so unworkable that Conservative ministers never commenced them and never implemented them. 34 major clauses that were passed through this House but never commenced because ministers knew they wouldn't work. 16 more that were commenced in law but never operationalised because they were simply unworkable. And the chaotic combination of Clause 9 and Clause 2, which meant that anyone who arrived could claim asylum, get asylum support, get put up in an asylum hotel, but the Home Office could never take a decision on their case, so they would have had to stay forever an asylum hotel California, where you never leave, the backlog soars, and the taxpayer foots the bill. So yes, we are repealing many of those chaotic and gimmicky and broken laws, including the Safety of Rwanda Act, which then allows us to withdraw from the UK-Rwanda treaty that would otherwise cost us hundreds of millions more pounds for an unworkable scheme.
So how can she stand there telling us that letting 96% of illegal immigrants stay here is some kind of deterrent? It isn't. I give way.
I thank the Right Honourable Gentleman for giving way on that point. He seems very keen to reflect on the records of governments. In 2010, the number of people in the asylum system reached a record low of over 20 years. By the time his government had left office, it had ballooned by 13 times to 225,000. I wonder whether the Shadow Home Secretary could reflect on who was responsible for that.
Well, I wonder if the Honourable Gentleman knows which government it was who gave an effective asylum amnesty. It was the previous Labour government. And if he's so interested in the asylum backlog, does he know whether the asylum backlog has gone up or down under this new government? It's gone up. it's gone up, just like the number of illegal migrants crossing the Channel has gone up, leaving a safe country, France, from which there is no necessity to depart in order to find safety. France has a fully functioning asylum system, doesn't it?
I thank the Shadow Home Secretary for giving way. In 2018, 400 crossed. Under your government's watch, 130,000 crossed the border. Will you apologise now?
Well, the honourable gentleman is obviously not aware that in 2023 the numbers were going down, and since his government came to office on July the 4th last year, the number has gone up by 28%, and it completely cancels any prospect of establishing a removals deterrent, which the National Crime Agency says is necessary. Happily give way.
How many people were removed under their so-called deterrent by the previous government? How many? Four.
Be aware that it never even started. The first flight was due to take off on July the 24th, and his government cancelled it before it even started. That is their mistake, and as a result of that, illegal crossings have gone up by 28%. This isn't a border security bill, given the measures I've just mentioned. It is a border surrender bill. It is a weak bill. It is a weak bill from a weak government. Of course, I'll give way.
I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way. I sat on that side of the House when we had one of these ferocious debates. That time it was about Brexit, when this side of the House talked about surrenders and traitors and weak. He's now doing the same from that side of the House. Does he honestly believe that sort of language is conducive to getting to a solution? Does he think it makes any one person in this House feel better about themselves? Does he think it gives him the moral high ground? Because I think what it does is exposes his own inability to conduct an argument in a way that is vaguely civil.
Well, I think a bill which creates a path to citizenship for illegal migrants and cancels the obligation on the government to remove people who arrive illegally is a shocking piece of legislation, and that is why we have tabled the Reason Amendment in the terms that we have. And on that topic, I have given way a lot. Let me just make some progress. Of course I give way.
Thank you. Well, perhaps the Shadow Home Secretary can confirm that the measure from the IMA on citizenship, he can confirm, was never commenced because it was in fact unworkable. And in fact, what this government has done has actually strengthened the powers to make sure that small boat arrivals cannot get citizenship by strengthening the rules, because we've in fact done more on 7 months than his party did in 14 years. And if he really wants to support counter-terrorism-style powers, why is he going to vote against a second reading tonight?
Well, the Reasoned Amendment makes very clear we do support those powers, but we do not support the totality of the bill. And in terms of tough action, she has yet to explain to the House why these illegal crossings have gone up by 28% on her watch. The honourable gentleman has been extremely persistent, and I guess persistence deserves its reward.
Thank you for the reward. I hope to return one. The Border Security, Asylum and Immigration Bill should help UK law enforcement act earlier and faster to disrupt people smuggling networks and give us additional tools to target them and their business models. That's a direct quotation from the NCA Director General. The Conservative Party is about to oppose and vote against this bill. Why does the Shadow Home Secretary think that he knows better than the Director General of the National Crime Agency?
Well, I might gently say the point of a debate is to engage in just that rather than read out a pre-prepared question. But he will be aware that the National Crime Agency have said we need a deterrent, and this bill removes any legislative prospect of having a deterrent, and that is why we will be opposing it. 37, or Clause 37 rather, which repeals the entirety of the Safety of Rwanda Act. Now, which appears to command some rather unwise enthusiasm on the other side of the House. Now, the Rwanda scheme, as I've said already, was due to start on the 24th of July with the first flight, following extensive legal challenge and legislation in this House. Very unwisely, the government chose never to start that scheme which would have seen a deterrent effect, because it stands to reason if you try and cross illegally into a country like the UK and you're going to get removed to Rwanda, you're not going to bother trying to cross in the first place. We've seen that kind of scheme work elsewhere. We've seen it work in Australia around about 10 years ago with their Operation Sovereign Borders. We've seen it work here as well in 2023 when we had a removals agreement with Albania, which saw Albanians go from being the most numerous cohort crossing the Channel. That went down by 93%. Because again, it stands to reason, it stands to reason, if you arrive here and get removed, you won't bother crossing in the first place. But don't take my word for that. The National Crime Agency says you need a deterrent, and even their own border security commander, who can't command very much, Martin Hewitt, says we need a deterrent. Now, somebody was very enthusiastically seeking to intervene. Go on, I'll take that intervention over.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Shadow Home Secretary has said that the National Crime Agency has suggested that Rwanda would be a deterrent. The head of the National Crime Agency has specifically said others are implying that we support Rwanda, and that isn't true. Would you withdraw that?
No, what the National Crime Agency said was that we need a deterrent. That is what they said, that is what I quoted, and their own border security commander made the same point.
The asylum system completely collapsed under the last Tory government, but according to Gito Harry, Boris Johnson was the greatest Prime Minister in living memory, so you can see him trying to rewrite history in the video that's on screen now. So go watch that next. Don't forget to hit that like button, and I'll see you next time.